Welcome, everyone. My name is Sneha, and I have the honor of introducing today's panelists. I want to welcome you on the behalf of Nogo Jiwanong to Palestine, Jews for a Free Palestine, and the Coalition to Prevent Genocide in Gaza to today's panel. So our panel will be moderated by the wonderful Peter Boullata. Peter is a writer and an activist. He's also an ordained minister and spiritual director, and holds degrees in English and theology from Concordia University and University of Toronto, respectively. He is Palestinian, born in Jerusalem in the wake of the Six-Day War, but grew up in Montreal. Our next panel speaker that I have the honor of introducing is Aseel Zahran. Yeah, let's give it up. Aseel is a Palestinian peacebuilding practitioner and critical pedagogy designer. Aseel received her master's in sustainability studies at Trent University, and her research focused on environmental justice and greenwashing. Aseel also asked me to ad-lib some of her introduction, so I wanted to say that over the past year that we've been organizing together, I've had the privilege of not only working alongside Aseel, but sharing meals and some laughs in the sauna together. So, and she also was on our previous panel that we did, I believe, last May. So she's a very gifted public speaker, and I'm sure you'll learn a lot from the words she has to share. Our next panelist is Mohammad Al-Hroub. Mohammad, yes. Give it up. Mohammad is from the village of Wadi Fukin, a small agricultural village in the occupied West Bank known for its organic farming tradition and production of grapes, fruits, almonds, and olive oil. Mohammad has a background in farming, environmental sustainability, and educational program management. He and his brother Anas co-own Wadi Fine Foods, a new feature at the Saturday downtown market. If you haven't tried their hummus and falafel, you absolutely must. Also a catering business, Wadi Fine Foods specializes in ethically sourced, high-quality products and the celebration of authentic Palestinian cuisine. Mohammad is an activist dedicated to the cause of Palestinian liberation and justice. All right, our next, yeah. All right. Karen, oh, hello? Okay, we're still good. Karen Isaacs is the next panelist I have the pleasure of introducing. Yes. Karen is an educator and community organizer who has spent the past decade living in Israel-Palestine and working to bring the international Jewish community into movement work on the ground alongside Palestinian and Israeli activists. She is a founder of Achvat Amim. This is not an ulpan. I'm sorry. And All That's Left. Karen has spent extensive time in Masafriyata, the subject of No Other Land, as an activist, as well as in her work with a community-based storytelling project supporting Palestinian activists to tell their stories in English. The next panelist I have the pleasure of introducing is Feyzi Baban. Feyzi is the chair, yes. He's the chair of Global Justice and Development at Trent University. He specializes in global comparative politics and critical theories of international relations. Feyzi's main teaching interests are global politics, migration, and citizenship. His research investigates the conditions which lead some communities in various European countries to be more open to cultural difference, the types of projects that facilitate openness to newcomers, and how citizens and non-citizens participate in projects that transform understanding of citizenship and belonging. Feyzi has been teaching the government and politics in the Middle East and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict classes at Trent for over 2 decades. I also wanted to let folks know that for anyone who is not able to be here, or for anyone who wants to view the panel after the fact, we will be live streaming on our Instagram page. And the video of the panel will also be available on the ReFrame website, hopefully as of Tuesday. So thank you so much, and without further ado, I'll hand it over to Peter.
Hey, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you all for being here for this. I'd like to begin just by acknowledging that viewing the film has probably brought up a lot of emotions for many of us. I think it's hard not to feel anything with the immediacy of the kind of film work that was done in the film, in the sense that it feels like we're there. So whatever feelings are arising in you from the viewing of that film, grief or sadness or anger, my advice is to let those feelings arise. I think that that what we feel when we are witnesses to that kind of violence and injustice are resources for us. If we didn't feel anything, we would have no resources for action. So let your feelings inform your actions, and don't get stuck in the feelings, but move to being move to action based on what you feel. Many in this room have been active over the last 15 months to bring about a ceasefire in Gaza. The recent cessation of hostilities, let's call it, we don't know yet if it's a permanent ceasefire. Many of us have been calling for a permanent ceasefire and an end to the occupation, and we're far from that. We also see with the cessation of hostilities how there was an immediate pivot to the West Bank. Just in the news this week, the Israeli army raiding Jenin, and all kinds of renewed settler violence in a number of areas on the West Bank. So I think that what we saw in the film this afternoon was really a microcosm of what's happening in the entire West Bank. And we've got a wonderful panel of people with lived experience in the West Bank in particular, and somewhat more broadly in Palestine, Israel, and the larger region. I did want to start with Karen, who you've been in Musafariyata as part of your activism, and I was hoping you would speak to us a little bit about what it was like for you on the ground there, and more.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. So yeah, by way of small introduction, other than what was said already, I've been living in Palestine, Israel for the past decade or so. Since last October, I've been here. As you can maybe tell from my accent, I grew up here in Canada. My mom is Israeli, my dad is Canadian, and there's a lot of complicated family relationships and personal relationships that led me to live there and to try to do what I could as part of the movement to end the occupation. And part of that led me to spending a lot of time in the Musafariyata. It's one of the places in the West Bank, as you saw in the film, that has a long history of what we call a joint struggle, where the Palestinian activists in the communities, as Nasser Basil's father said at one point in the film, we are welcoming everyone who's here to join us in our struggle. And that's been something that, starting from the elders in the film that you see, through the parents, like Nasser and Kifah, Basil's parents, and to the younger generation, they've all shared in the sense that they're very, as you can see, also they're very welcoming people in these communities, and it's been important for them to do that and partly to not feel alone, and also because practically speaking, there's some added value to having people with different privileges under the systems of occupation and apartheid that exist there, who are able to leverage that in some way in different kinds of situations. So, I'll say I was also brought into that work by an older generation of Israeli activists who started being active in Misafriyata during the second Intifada, when all of the West Bank, but especially there, was facing an extreme level of repression from the occupation. And the first, I think they mentioned it, Basil says, when he was a kid, a baby, was the first expulsion of all the villagers from what was declared as a firing zone. And that actually, it was an expulsion of many, I think like 12 villages in the firing zone. And they went to court, as you also saw in the film, and they were able to come back. And I think that's one of the things that, as myself getting involved there many years ago, was very powerful, that you see that the people in these communities have an extreme determination to stay on their land, as do all Palestinians, but that's where I spent a lot of time. A vision for making that happen, even when it's only possible to do it on a small scale. So the first, thing that I was really involved in a big way there was something that we called Samud Freedom Camp, that was in 2017, where the Palestinian activists in the area, many of whom you see in the film, decided to help families go back to their land that was in the area declared as a firing zone that they left a decade prior because of settler violence and obviously the military violence. And we got together many Israeli activists, international Jewish activists, and of course all the Palestinian activists from the community, and also Palestinian activists from other areas of the West Bank and from 48 from Israel, who joined us, and it was hundreds of people, and we established a camp in this village, and managed to actually stay there for a few weeks, despite the army's attempts to remove us. And that was kind of the beginning of those families actually being able to go back to that land and rehabilitate their caves and their wells and be able to stay there. So for me, I'll say as an activist, as a human being, that was a very powerful experience of actually succeeding in pushing back against the occupation, and understanding that it was possible to kind of, through our actions, imagine and create something of how we would want to see the future, which is people acting together and be able to live together and do something that is both pushing back against the sort of the violent forces of dispossession and showing that there's an alternative. And many such actions followed that. And I'll, let other people talk now, and I can say more later, but I think the last thing I'll say for now is that I think the question of, for everyone else here, in a different position than me, but I'll say for those of you in the audience who, like me, are in a position of being in solidarity, I think sort of the most important thing I've learned is also something Basil says in the film, which is just to sort of, you have to be in it for a long time. It's not going to come quickly. I'll pass it to other people for now.
Yeah, I think he said, you think you can end the occupation in 10 days, which is, you're enthusiastic. Mohammad, your village of Wadi Fakin is also in the West Bank, and has had similar or parallel sorts of experiences. I'd really love for you to share with the audience some of your experience from your village.
I would like to first really acknowledge how heavy of emotion that movie was. I was very close to tear during the movie because it brought up lots of memories that I lived those memories and I experienced those protests and smell the tear gas and hearing the bombs and seeing the settlers and settlements, expanding and taking lands. So yeah, that movie was extremely heavy and well done, and I really thank them for working hard to get the word out. And it's kind of make me feel like, again, like I used to say it, and I want to continue to say it, as like finally people are hearing the Palestinians, like finally after all those years, like finally people are like seeing Palestinian as non-terrorists. It's hard, and it feels like we are always in a position of defending ourselves. But it's changing, and part of this changing, being here today to talk about our experiences and my personal experience. I was personally born in Bethlehem, and I grew up in a small village near Bethlehem. It's called Wadi. It means valley, and Fukin is an Aramic term, Jesus' language period time. And growing up there, I have lived the majority of my life going down in the valley and growing vegetables and being like a farmer with my grandparents, and enjoying the mountain and seeing the deers and different kind of animals. And this is my son in the back making the noise. We grew up understanding the importance of land, and like why we should take care of our land, and why we should keep working working the land. I wasn't aware of it as much as I'm aware of it right now. At the time when I was, 9 years old, 10 years old, when my grandparents are telling me like, we should continue, Rayan. we should continue, looking after the land and take care of it, and this is our part of our identity, and it's become more of a land that provides food, and it's become part of who you are as identity as a Palestinian, because of what you saw in the movie, that eventually a bunch of ideologists who have a theory in their mind that God promised the land to them, and then when you talk to them they don't believe in God, and then you get confused and you have no idea what's going on. It's like unfortunate reality that you'd be like, why are you doing this? And of course, they'd be like, somebody mentioned that comment, it's legal. I'm like, forget about legal or illegal. It's more of a, are you human? Like, we breathe the same air? But of course, they built those beautiful settlements with developed roads and running water 24/7. And in the summer they need more water, so they close the tap to the village. And so we did lose lands for those settlements as my family. And even though we tried to fight, with documents that this land belongs to us way before the existence of the state of Israel, and they give you 90 days, of course, to prove that this land's to you, and you good luck getting this in an Israeli court. When you don't have anything as an identity or ID that's showing that you are an Israeli. So basically, the state of Israel affects our lives from A to Z, yet we have no saying in anything, like the other election or anything. And we need a permit to move around. So, coming to Canada and understanding freedom afterward, I just want to share that because it was part of our identity to feel like, okay, maybe I will come back to this, but it's really important to share that. Many of you are wearing the watermelon symbol for Palestine, or the kufiya. I am personally afraid to wear it, even though I'm Palestinian. I am scared shitless to wear it because this is oppression, and back in my mind, if I wear anything that's showing I'm Palestinian, I will be arrested, I will be kicked, I will be in jail, I will be whatever they can do to me. And being here and seeing people wearing it, I feel kind of ashamed and proud at the same time because, you're wearing it, but I should be wearing it, but I'm afraid to wear it because in my subconscious I'm so afraid. And then now I know that there is freedom and I can speak my mind in this country and not back home. I mean, there is limitation, but so I'm being a little bit here and there, but we did lose land, back to that, and settlements are still expansion. We got homes demolished in the village. We the farmers market, everybody that I'm there, I bring in olive oil from Palestine, which is our own olive oil from our farm. And unfortunately, we lost access to a lot of land to be able to bring more olives. That's a bigger example. And that's back to what does it mean land to us means that if I am a Palestinian without a land, I don't belong anywhere. So, yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Of all the jurisdictions that Palestinians live under in that territory between the river and the sea, the West Bank is unique in some ways in terms of the formalized discrimination between Jews and non-Jews in that particular territory. So I'd like to turn it over to you to tell us a little bit more about that. Describe some of that to us.
Thank you, Peter. After such a powerful movie, sometimes it's really difficult to talk and to say something. But nevertheless, what I would like to do maybe in a couple of minutes to put what we saw in that movie into the larger context of the apartheid system under which the Palestinians live. The 1973 International Convention on the Suppression and Punishment of the Crime of Apartheid defines apartheid as inhuman acts committed for the purpose of establishing and maintaining domination by one racial group of persons over any other racial group of persons and systematically oppressing them. And based on that definition, in the last 10, 15 years, lots of organizations conducted very detailed studies and issued reports that establishing actually what is taking place in Palestine. It is a very complicated and sophisticated form of apartheid system. If I give some of the examples of one of the earlier ones, for instance, in 2020, it was the Yeshedin, that was the Israeli organization, the Volunteers for Human Rights, issued its report. In 2021, Human Rights Watch. In 2021, the Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem. In 2022, Amnesty International. In 2022, again, the United Nations Special Envoy Michael Link on the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967. And then finally, in 2024, the advisory opinion by the International Court of Justice titled Legal Consequences Arising from the Policies and the Practices of Israel in the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including Jerusalem. And these are extremely detailed and meticulous reports for hundreds of pages. So I would urge anybody who have any doubts in their minds that what takes place in Palestine, whether it's an apartheid or not, I would urge you to take a look at those reports. And I must also add that talking about genocide in Israel is actually not controversial. It is done regularly, openly, and very comfortably. The right and the Jewish supremacists, they advocate and they endorse and they condone apartheid because for them to maintain the ethno-nationalist nature of Israel, the apartheid actually is necessary, and there are no excuses and apologies about that. It is out in the open. And the rest of the Israeli establishment constantly mentions that if Israel holds on to the Palestinian territories, which now has no intention of giving them up, that the outcome is apartheid. There is no other outcome. So this is something that's openly discussed in Israel. There are, however, a couple of things that complicates the type of apartheid that Israel exercises in Palestine, let's say compared to the South African one, and sometimes confuses people. The one is South Africa was an openly declared apartheid state. South Africa declared itself as an apartheid state, and Israel doesn't. But Israel does not need to declare itself as an apartheid state because the policies and the laws are built into every aspect of Israeli legal system. So it can exercise apartheid without declaring itself as an apartheid state. In 2008-2009, the Justice Richard Goldstein, when he conducted an investigation into Israel's yet another war on Gaza, in that report he actually concluded that Israel violated the Apartheid Convention, having noted that the discrimination and differential treatment between Palestinians and Israeli Jews in domains including land use, housing, access to natural resources, citizenship, residence and family unification, access to food and water supplies, the use of force against demonstrators, freedom of movement, access to health, education and social services, and freedom of association. So in a vast range of social life, all Israeli lives, the laws and policies actually embed these discriminatory practices. And then it's sort of another confusing aspect of apartheid system in Israel, and that is Israel implements these policies in a differential manner in different parts of the territory that it controls. So some of the discriminatory practices applied within Israel against the Palestinians of Israeli citizens are different than the residents of Jerusalem who are residents but not citizens, and then some discriminatory practices that implemented in West Bank and Gaza, and of course the Palestinians in that they're neither residents of Israel nor citizens. By applying different sets of policies to different populations, that not only divides Palestinians into these different legal jurisdictions, but it actually confuses the nature of the apartheid system. So maybe I should stop, but I can go into details in the second round later on.
Thank you, Feyzi. I think we saw some of that illustrated in the film. I think particularly striking for me was the scene in the courtroom. Where the army confiscates land and then removes people from it, and then it becomes like a site of like an settlement outpost, like an illegal settler outpost, which then becomes a more built-up settlement, and then it becomes, and then trying to get justice. When we also saw on Israeli television, the whoever that was saying, but they were building without permit on army land, right? And like this is the kind of Kafka-esque apartheid system that we see there. And we also see kind of in microcosm again in this region of the West Bank and throughout. Kind of I want to say a continuation, like the expropriation of land, the destruction of homes, the removal of people from their land didn't begin with the occupation in 1967. It's been ongoing since 1948. So, Aseel, I'm hoping maybe you could give us some of the historic context around 1948 and some of what we've seen in the film.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jordanian Palestinian. I grew up in Jordan and in the UAE. I'm a Palestinian who's never been to Palestine. So my experience of Palestine is maybe different from Mohammad and I. When I watch a film like this, I think a part of me is like a hungry child who's like wants to like absorb everything and understand and yeah, just there's a sense of homesickness. And it's a reflection of the different ways, the different types of Palestinians and how they experience home. There's so much in the movie that I identify with, but we'll get that in a second. I mean, if you don't mind, Peter, I'll wing it a little bit. I think for me, you know, the movie highlights, and I think all of us, you know, for the past 15, 18 months have been exposed to these different sides of domination and Palestinian resistance at the same time. And in the movie, there are these like very small vignettes of how Israel exerts control over Palestinians. We see how domination kind of permeates every aspect of Palestinian life and the different forms of control, from militarized borders, checkpoints, to a lot of us have, you know, experienced sort of, you know, erasure of Palestinian narratives, but we see, you know, kind of like Palestinians being their ability to resist, to stay steadfast, like their resourcefulness is taken away from them with this destruction, right? There's a moment when the women don't have access to their kitchens, you know, for example, where concrete is spilled on land. It's just a the image is kind of, was hard to watch for me in particular. But I think when I think about the story of Palestine and settler colonialism in Palestine, Israel, we see very clearly in the movie, and we know that really land lies at the heart of settler colonial formation. Ownership, control, exploitation of land and its resources is sort of like central to the settlers' identity, and we see that both in the rhetoric of the Israeli administration, but also in the rhetoric of the U.S. administration and recent conversations that we've heard. The new bro-oligarchs of America, I heard this term, I thought it was very fitting to what we see in America. The likes of Trump and Jared Kushner talking about Gaza's waterfront, which is a perfect location for real estate. So, I mean, we see in this movie how like settler colonialism operates through a worldview that sees land and its indigenous inhabitants as existing for the benefit of the settler, land acquisition, and we now see these practices kind of persist in new forms, whether it's Palestinians being denied the right to return to their homelands, homes being bulldozed, state-backed Israeli violent attacks, as we saw in the film, and I think it's just like this idea of land is so important, and we know that settler colonialism destroys to replace. and territorial control is its primary motive. And we see with the Israeli state that the structure sort of adapts over time, but it remains fundamentally unchanged in its goals to kind of maintain this position by attacking Palestinian bodies and this fragmenting the social fabric of Palestinians. It seeks to legitimize itself by recasting the settler as the new native and erasing the histories of the displaced and asserting itself as moral authority, which is also, we see these soldiers assert themselves as moral authority over Palestinian land and people. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you. So the screening this afternoon was the first time I saw this film. And it does not yet have a North American distributor, apparently, nor can we stream it anywhere in Canada. But the publicity surrounding the film has been sort of celebrating the fact that it's a joint Israeli-Palestinian production. And we see in the film Basil and Yuval's friendship kind of emerge, although it looks like they're meeting each other for the first time on camera, but actually they're not. And that friendship is also celebrated. So watching the film, it was interesting for me to note that there was the hospitality, which is a core value in Palestinian society, being offered to Yuval, but it was a complicated friendship. In terms of apartheid, that the one with the yellow license plates could drive back to Israel, and the one with the green license plate could not leave the West Bank. So, which I think complicated my own sense of, this is a hopeful film, and we're going to end on a note of friendship between the Israeli journalist and the Palestinian who has been filming what's been happening in his village for years. And I noted that before sort of the post-October 2023, the conversation where the two of them were talking about, well, one day when there's no, I forget what they were saying exactly, but like when there's no, checkpoints, there's no occupation, we'll be able to visit each other, go back and forth, freely. And the subtitle said, I hope, and the other guy said, I hope, but they were saying, inshallah, one day that will be the case. And then cut straight to October 2023. I was just wondering if any of the panelists had thoughts about the first of all, cooperation between Israelis and Palestinians in terms of ending the occupation. And in terms of what might be possible on both sides of the wall, in terms of friendship and solidarity.
Yeah, I think this film. Look, when you're trying to make a film, you need to think of a specific story to tell, right? And I think they did a really good job showing a lot of different stories in the film. There's the story of Harun and his family, the story of Basil and Yvonne's friendship, the story of Basil's family, and him sort of coming into that tradition of being activist. There's many stories in there, and there's also many stories that they didn't tell. And I think one of the, originally, I'll say all of the filmmakers, but especially Basil and Hamdan are good friends of mine, and they wanted to make this film before they ever met Yuval. They originally wanted to make a film about home demolitions. And you can see that's a story in the film too. And then they met Yuval, and then and the the situation with Haroun, that happened while they had already started making the film. Like they're filming that protest because they had already started filming. And so choosing which story to tell is like, anyway, it's unsurprising that an international audience would be focused on the story of the particular friendship between these two, very sweet people. But I think the bigger story in terms of the relationship between, like the solidarity relationships in the film is the longer story, is the story that, it's not about Yuval as Yuval, right? Like there's many of us Yuvals, and I think in that region in particular, and it's different. There's been other places, like if in the era of like building the wall, there were other places that became famous also internationally that had a lot of Israeli activists in solidarity, at that time, and I'll just say that sort of that kind of thing comes and goes, right? Like as does the popular resistance in the West Bank, that has its ups and its downs over the years, according to the situation. And I think right now is the time that those relationships are more important than ever. There's, the situation I described earlier was like a hopeful, it was one of the more hopeful moments of activism, and right now is not that kind of a time. And I'll actually take this moment to read something that Hamdan asked me to share with you. I said, is there anything you want me to share with people here? He said, I want to tell people after watching the film that the settler violence is still ongoing until now, and the demolition of houses in Masafer Yatta has increased in its intensity. What I want from them is to pressure their governments to end the occupation and apartheid here in Masafer Yatta, and please tell them we face danger every day. And earlier today, my friend Ali, who you see briefly in the film, he's getting stopped by the soldiers. He's like, I want to go back to my home. So his car was torched by settlers just earlier today. And things are getting worse. Things are really, really, really bad there right now. And I think it's important to, just to be paying attention and thinking about what are the material ways that we can help people there right now, not in an abstract, like of course in the long run we all want a free Palestine, but right now there's all of these people who are just trying to survive, and thinking about how to support them in a really practical way is, I think, the role of solidarity in this moment, or maybe one, I don't know, I don't know everything about everything, but like we as Israeli and Jewish activists there, it's these days it's showing up, and you see like it's important to know, there is a younger generation of Israeli activists who, even in the time of the film, you would only know if you're looking for it, but you see more younger Israelis being present there, and all of these protests about Haroun did, touch people and bring them into the struggle, and those people are still there, day in, day out, as much as you can to just, accompany a shepherd, stand in the way, document, whatever you could do, accompany people to court, be, as Mohammad said, like it's hard as a Palestinian to deal with the Israeli, like, military legal system. It's not even a legal system. It's like a legal system run by the military, So, for example, like going as I did, like you saw after the protest, they were coming to arrest Basil. They didn't arrest Basil, but they arrested our other friend Sammy. So then he had a trial. Then he had this. So I went to the military court to testify. These kind of things is like, it's not going to end the occupation, but it's going to keep somebody out of jail. It's going to help a family stay on their land a little longer. So just thinking about what we can do on a really like practical level, I think, is really, really important.
I'd like to add something to that, because I think I do agree with you, because as far as, I have been following the Israeli-Palestinian issue in the last 30 years, since my PhD times, that there has been cooperation between Palestinians and Israelis in the activism. And on the ground, these cooperations are extremely important. But the one thing that we need to keep in mind, the system in place, the structure is so overwhelming. It goes beyond these solidarities and what these solidarities are able to achieve. One of the things that I didn't mention in the first round of comments is that, and perhaps what is very peculiar about this particular form of apartheid in Palestine, it is actually a high-tech apartheid. So the Israel uses extremely sophisticated information technologies to monitor and control every aspect of Palestinian lives, starting with biometric population registry, biometric ID cards, the surveillance techniques, the e-gates, drones, the weapons. Every aspect of Palestinian lives are surveilled, controlled, monitored. In places like Hebron, this is it to the extreme degree, but in other parts of West Bank is also in place. So that actually makes the political activism very difficult, because before it arises, before these solidarities kind of, achieve something, Israel shuts them down because it monitors and surveillance all human rights organizations, all civil society activities. So then on the ground, as you said, what happens is that, Yuval is there and it helps and maybe, brings some information out and keeps someone outside the jail. But the system is so overwhelming, and that's the biggest difference. Like the South Africans, they were actually never able to put that kind of a sophisticated domination system that exists today in Israel.
So keeping people on their land, keeping people out of jail, and material support is one thing I'm hearing. But also that the pressure needs to be brought to bear on the system itself. I was watching, in the film, the bulldozers, and just thinking, that's an American company, right? Like that this sophisticated technology which is being used to dominate the Palestinians is being produced here. On Turtle Island, and Canada has a role to play in that as well. So I think for us, some of the pressure that needs to be brought to bear on the system is, boycott and sanctions and divestment on those companies that are in the occupied territories and who are benefiting from the occupation, including Microsoft. Apparently, they've been helping with the slaughter in Gaza and elsewhere. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
I mean, the question of solidarity and collective struggle versus, I don't know, in my head when I think about it as someone who has studied peace building, is like, okay, peace building versus collective struggle. I think for me, and there's a moment actually in the movie where Basil reads this comments oh, peace for Palestine, kind of with some sarcasm. And I know for myself, as someone who's been in the field of peace building, that the language of peace has been kind of weaponized by the oppressor, by Israel, by Zionists, by liberal Zionists, to kind of stifle a liberatory imagination for Palestinians, and to also distract from the deep entrenchment of settler colonialism. Of course, this also includes sort of, the Middle East peace process that started with Oslo Accords and transformed basically an anti-colonial movement for liberation into a state-building project that ultimately served to pacify and control Palestinians. And we still see that till today, with particularly in the past few weeks with Jenin and attacks by the Palestinian authorities, the raids on Jenin. So I feel like the framework of peace has become a tool to further entrench Israeli settler colonial violence and power, and what's needed is what a scholar that I hold very dearly, Mazen Qumsiya, says collective struggle. Mazen Qumsiya says real peace building requires facing hard realities, and for the occupiers who wish to work with the oppressed to challenge the system and genuinely join the struggle of the oppressed. So I think, to me, when I think about solidarity, collective struggle, peace building, it's not about attending to equity. It's not about attending to equity in relation to the state. It's not about asking the state for more equity or for justice for Palestinian, but I think it demands sort of a reckoning with settler privilege and with issues critical to Palestinians, such as, an acknowledgement of the harm, return of the land, which I know sound very abstract, but I do think there needs to be some sort of reckoning. I'll stop there. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. No, I just wanna. I wonder if Yuval wasn't in that movie, will the movie make it all the way here? You know, like. In the West Bank right now, with the ceasefire in Gaza, all the attention right now in the West Bank to satisfy the ideologists within the government, because they want the West Bank as they want everything else. And what you saw in Masafer Yatta, what we call the soft occupation. This is very soft, very easy. If I have an Israeli or international organization to come and support and to push a court case, okay, we'll help you postpone it because they are foreign/Israelis and they know the system from the other side than me, a Palestinian, going straight. Imagine like I need my citizenship in Canada to be, expedited. I know somebody from the system, they help me out. So it's like a similar situation, but the system is still the system. Today I will not demolish it, but I will come back tomorrow. That's okay. But because Israelis, they play on the long run. They see it as like they plan for 60 years, for 800 years from now. And meanwhile, as the Palestinian, I just want to survive today. My focus is like I want to bring food for my family today, and tomorrow if I dead, I'm dead. Like let me just focus on today. There is one clip in the movie when the mother told the son, I want to wash your clothes because if they come and take you, have it clean clothes. And this is just reminded me when I used to go to the university back in Palestine, like Al-Quds University. Every morning my mother makes sure that I have clean underwears and a clean undershirt, because if I get arrested or I get shot, when they want to aid me, I have clean clothes. And it's sad and yeah. So solidarity, sure, like let's. And collaboration with Israelis, but like the occupations, for majority of the Palestinian, when they ask them, the occupation is not just the West Bank. Sure, military is occupying me in the West Bank, but there is the Palestinian in refugee camps that they are dreamed to go back to Haifa and Haifa and those places where their grandparents from. But sure, you want to give me two states, give me two states. But at the end of the day, at least give me some freedom, give me something, So, yeah.
Not every Palestinian village can host Tony Blair to bring that kind of attention. My own cousin in Jerusalem, Terry Boullata, was a human rights activist who was arrested and tortured by the Israelis, who got the attention of the wife of François Mitterrand of France, and was able to get out of prison and come to Canada for medical treatment that she needed. So there is something to be said for the international eye being there. But it's not enough. but we are the international community, and we are not powerless. Do we have time for questions from the audience? What's our time?
We have maybe about
Okay. So maybe let's have 3 or 4 questions. And if a question isn't what you have, but a comment or a response, just I'll ask you to keep it brief. Why don't you ask your question? I'll just repeat what you're saying into the microphone.
I just wonder how can we really help? But I mean Canadians. I don't mean the First Nations people, because we have our own struggles with the state. But I wouldn't, I've been reluctant to go to talks and all that kind of stuff. But I think, is it kind of like an insult for us to think of what can we do? Like, I don't want to hear any more. I don't want to hear any more. Kind of like, we'll find out what's going on. But I know what's going on. Yeah. It's murder and all kinds of horrible. So, in my little wee mind, I thought about, so what? Can we fly over there? If we really wanted to help as Canadians, can we? What if we flew over there? As in help, would that help? And really, I want to know what do you think? How could we really help than just talking about it?
So the question is, what can we do? What can Canadians do? What can we actually do? Coming to films and panel discussions, we get a lot of information and analysis, and many of us have had enough and would like to act. Panel, what can we do? I do know that, there's groups like, that I'm most familiar with are like Christian peacemaking teams that are mostly historically peace churches who go there and do exactly that. They go there and they're intervene in a lot of...
and have they gone over there?
They have. They're still there now on the ground. We need a whole lot more of them.
There is actually an initiative right now to really increase what they're calling like unarmed civilian protection in the West Bank specifically. Someone in the States and some Palestinian activists in the West Bank are working on trying to really scale up. Like it exists, obviously, as you saw in the film and as we talked about, and there are things like, the Christian peacemaker teams, and if any Jewish folks are here in the audience, there's something called the Center for Jewish Nonviolence that my partner runs, that you can go and be there for anywhere. You could go for a 3-month in Masafer Yatta right now. There's people about to go for 3 months in the for the olive harvest as well. So that bringing people to physically be there on the ground is, I think, really important. It's something that people can do. It's something I think that people should do. People said, it's fucked up that someone might pay more attention to something because there's a Canadian there. That is definitely fucked up, but it is true. Even, for example, I don't know if this is not really in the film, but there's, the Tony Blair example, I guess, is a good example. Tony Blair came and they canceled this thing, and similarly, there was a case of children from Tuba, a small village where my friend's car was just torched, that had to come to school in Twani in Basil's community, and they had to walk past this outpost where they were getting attacked by these, like the settlers you saw in the film. It's that same outpost they came down from, the ones who were coming into the village, and they, only because there were an American and a European volunteer accompanying them, and again, this is a fucked up solution. The Israeli court, or I think the parliament, decided to put a jeep of the army that has to accompany these children to school to protect them from the settlers, which is like, can you imagine? You have to go and, as a Palestinian child, and the army is protecting you from these settlers. It's like totally insane. It's still happening like 20 years later. And that only happened because they broke the arm of this American activist, you know? It's not to be taken lightly, and it's extremely dangerous right now to go and put yourself in that situation, now more than it's ever been. You saw at the end of the film, they shot Zachariah, who was like, right, trying to prevent the settler from coming into the village. So again, I don't say this to anyone lightly, but it is possible to go there, and I do think that it's important.
Just make sure you don't say you're going to the West Bank, because when you land at the airport, they'll question you.
Yeah, and also don't just go on your own. Like, don't just show, nobody just book a flight and show up. I think that's part of, and to say something about what you said before, like, I think all of these solidarity relationships, it's based on being invited. You know, it's something that is, you can only do if people want you to come and do it, you know? So it's a choice that they're making. It's a choice the Palestinian activists in these communities, some communities and some communities don't want that, and that's okay too, you know? But in the places that they do, you know, people should respond to their invitation.
And I do actually have another suggestion. If you can't go there, there's something really important to do here. Make this conflict visible. Because part of the reason why that what we see in that movie has been going on is that because it's not visible to larger public. We're here, and I think people who are here already know, already quite aware of, as you said, you've heard these things before. But the majority of the Canadian public do not know, because this, what you see here, is hidden from them. And that's why there's no distributor for this movie. It's not going to be seen by. I'll just quickly tell you an experience of mine. When I started teaching the Arab-Israeli conflict at Trent, and I think it was 2002, 2003, I said, well, what should I do? How should I teach this course? Like, it's a complicated history. How students are going to read this? How are they going to relate it to this? So then I decided, and back then in 2003, there was some peace process to talk about. It wasn't like this. So then I set the class as a peace conference. So the students, they would actually become Israelis and Palestinians, that they would negotiate. Actually, Zisha was one of those who took that class. I don't know when you took Zisha.
I don't know why we didn't succeed.
Well, not that long. And, you know, and they used to actually run a peace conference based on what took place. And I've run that, I think, for 15, 16 years. Once the peace just like became a sham word, I stopped doing it because it just became meaningless. But every year, without exception, once we're done, the students would always say, how can this go on? Because they had no idea, right? Is that without an exception, they said, we had no idea something like this was happening. So for the general public, they have no idea. That's why when you say, well, there's an apartheid system in Israel, people get outraged. Because this is a part of the thing that we're dealing with in South African case. You would say there's an apartheid in South Africa, and the majority of the public would agree because that was the discourse. It was accepted. Here, you're actually accused of telling lies because there's an apartheid system going on. So I would say that anybody who feels strongly about this, talk, make it visible, get engaged, and people who are not aware of it, make sure that they're aware.
So you're telling us that a lot of Canadians don't know about that?
Yeah. A lot of Canadians don't know about it.
They
Yeah.
are trained otherwise as youth.
Right.
Yeah, really critical.
Let's have one last question right here.
It's actually a comment.
A comment.
To build on. Thank you very much for the panel. It's just to build on what you asked, is how can you get more involved? I know this may sound small, but I think it's really, really important. Buying Palestinian products help Palestinian farmers. So I want to give props to that. If you go to the farmers market, market and buy products that are Palestinian, some of that goes back to the farmers and the people who are there. So just to build on what Karen said, there's the ultimate objective, but there's also the here and now that supports people who need livelihood and need support over there. So that's, like I'd say, like if you're unable to do that kind of travel, then at least by buying Palestinian products, you're able to support that.
So a flip side of boycott is to support Palestinian farmers, to buy Palestinian fairly traded products here in Canada. I'm afraid we are out of time. So I will thank you all for being here, and to remember and to think about some of the actions that you might be taking, having seen this film, having heard from us here today, for a future for Palestinians and Israelis that is based on peace and freedom, which is what we are here for a free Palestine. So thank you.